Southern
Hold on one
Apartments
second.
on Penn Southern Apartments on off of Pennsylvania Avenue on Southern Avenue. At the time, this apartment complex was owned by a white owner. And when I went in, I noticed they had lots of vacancies. I mean, the vacancy signs were there. And I went in to inquire about renting an apartment, 2-bedroom apartment, and was told that I'm sorry, we don't have a vacancy. And so I thanked the lady who was in the office, and I remember her words specifically. She said, "You are very welcome, I'm sure." I said, okay, all right. So I went on about my business and rented another apartment, went back to my old apartment where we were staying. And about a year or two later, actually it was less than a year, I think, that complex went up for sale, and it was bought by a black entrepreneur. And we were able to rent. And I told them about my experience of trying to rent, like a year earlier from this person. But it was, again, even though the Civil Rights Act had been signed and you weren't supposed to discriminate in certain areas, but of course then there was legislation having to deal with more than just the Civil Rights Act, because there were pieces that we know that the different titles that came about later. But moving from Virginia to D.C. and Maryland, I never gave much thought to having to encounter some of the same problems that we were faced with in Virginia, because we knew that we lived in housing. We had black communities, white communities, white high school, white churches. I mean, the most segregated hour in the week was Sunday morning at church. But those are just the things we lived with.
Now, you talked about, too, that in 1966 you're working at Andrews Air Force Base.
Yes.
And a white gentleman calls you. Can you talk about that story?
Oh, yes. That was interesting. One of my organizations that I serviced, this man called me one day, and he was very upset. And he said, "Miss Jordan," at the time I was not married, so he said, "Miss Jordan, I want to make an appointment to come up to see you because the black people are taking over down here." He worked in the transportation department at that time. And I said, "Sure, Mr. So-and-so, come on in. I would be more than happy. Let me check my calendar to see when it would be convenient for you to come in and talk with me." So he said, "Okay, because I just have to talk to somebody." "Okay, fine. Come on up." So I told my supervisor that this man was coming in. He was very irate because of what was going on in his organization. My supervisor said, "Well, did you tell him you were black?" I said, "That was irrelevant. Why should I tell him?" I said, "I'm here to provide a service, so I'm happy to talk with him." So he laughed. So my supervisor, that is, laughed. So when the gentleman came in to speak with me, he realized who he was talking with. So he never did even broach the subject of the discrimination that he was going to be talking to me about. So that was I had fun with some of these things that went on, because I realized that there's a level of ignorance that people have that you just can't get angry about. You just have to go with the flow and try to maintain your dignity and do what you have to do.
Yeah.
I can also remember when I was going back to the library incident, and I have broken up more than one staff meeting when we start talking and people talk about what they did when they were children growing up. I said, I never went to the library until I was an adult. You didn't? Because your parents they didn't take you to the library? I said, no. I said, they couldn't take me. I wasn't allowed. So my parents paid taxes, but I wasn't. Staff meetings were usually broken up. I did that a few times.
So there was this awareness, I assume, by the white population in these staff meetings that didn't understand why you.
They did not understand. They were clueless.
Yeah.
I mean, when. Okay, case in point. I attend Episcopal Church in Woodbridge now, and I was one of the parishioners, and I were serving on the vestry. So we were on a retreat that weekend, and I said, well, I'm going to Hopewell when I leave here. The retreat was in Richmond. He said, Hopewell? What do you know about Hopewell? I said, I grew up in Hopewell. He said, so did I. I said, yes, but you went to the white high school, didn't you? He said, oh, he was so apologetic. He called his wife and he told her, he said, guess what? Winnie grew up in Hopewell. I went to the school on the other side of the tracks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you can't, in order to move on, you can't hold that stuff in you. At the time, we never knew what impact we were making on anybody when we were students at Virginia State. We just did it because we knew it was the right thing to do and it was exciting. Ask me today if I would do that, I think I would say unequivocally no.
Was your mindset, we know we're going to get this accomplished? Was there any doubt in your mind?
There was no doubt in our mind, but we were fearless. We didn't, even though they told us, these are the things that you will encounter, maybe. It didn't matter. We thought, we've got to do this. Even after the Civil Rights Act was passed, and I was on the local bus in Hopewell one day going downtown, and I was on the bus. This white lady got on the bus. She was an elderly lady, and she asked me to move. I said, excuse me? She said, go to the back. I said, I will not. If you don't want to sit across from me, you go to the back. So the bus driver didn't say anything. I think he was a little fearful. He thought, oh my God, what have I got? So she got off the bus, and he later said to me, well, if you two had started anything, I was going to take you to jail. I said, so be it. I said, I wasn't going to move. So that's the way things were then. There were people who could not accept what was going on, what was happening. They just, they wanted things to be the way they were, because things were right for whites, but they were not right for us. But we accepted them because we couldn't do any differently. Our school books, my parents bought because they said, you will not use books. There were books sometime that the other schools, white schools, would give us as hand-me-downs, but my parents said, no, you will not use books. Mm-hmm. I will buy your books. So my dad would go to Hopewell High, the white school, buy our books from the bookstore, come home with bags of books for us. And
well, your dad was a groundbreaker, because there was an incident at Hercules where
yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yes. My dad was, my parents did not have the fortune of being educated, but they were so wise in so many ways. My dad was a wage earner, as I said, and he was a good worker, so as a result, the foreman would ask him to train different white men who would come into the plant area to work. And he, after about the second or third person he trained, who became his foreman, he was fed up. And he walked off the job. Now, I don't know too many men, white or black, who would have walked off the job with, I think there were four children, four of us at the time. And he was so hurt. The foreman went to the house, begged him to come back, and said, Cliff, we need you. You are a good worker, and we need you. I'm not sure if he promoted him or anything at the result. He didn't become a foreman, but that speaks volumes. And my husband has said to me so many times, Winnie, what motivates you to do things? I said, I have to think about what my parents encountered. I said, because life was not easy for them. My mother was a brave woman. She used to always talk about how sometimes people would go door to door selling things, and whites would refer to black women as auntie or auntie or something like that. And one day this man came to the house and he knocked on the door. He was selling melons and watermelons. And he said, Auntie, this is the sweetest watermelon you ever stuck your tooth in. She said, if you don't take that watermelon and get away from here, I will wash your face in it. So my parents were not afraid of anything, They just spoke their minds, and they said, well, whatever the consequences. So as a result, I have often said that as